Hello, everyone. Welcome to BC's Office of the Human Rights Commissioner's webinar this afternoon. I'm really glad that you're able to join us today for our session. We have a full lineup today and so much information to share with you that we're happy that you're on board, and we're going to give it a few minutes for everyone to get online, and I'll just keep talking so that you know that we're still here. But you'll notice from the page that's up on the screen when you join that we're in a webinar function, and it's a little bit different from the regular Zoom calls that you might all be familiar with. So I see we're up to about 34 participants now. You're all joining, and as you come on board, we'll give it a few minutes before we get fully started. I hope you're enjoying beautiful, warm, sunny weather where you are. It's gorgeous here in Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, and Musqueam territory, where I am in Vancouver. We have quite a large number of people signed up today. We've got about 81 people signed up to attend the session.
Awesome.
Yes, it's amazing what online technology can do. So just saying welcome to everyone who's joining us. We're giving it a few minutes before we get started so that everyone can join in to the discussion. So welcome to everyone joining us. I see we're at 38 participants now. We'll just give it a few more minutes before we get started on the session. And so we're at 1:05 now, and I think we should begin. I'd just like to welcome you all again to BC's Office of the Human Rights Commissioner's engagement session for the Fraser Valley. Welcome, everyone, and it's so glad to have you on board this afternoon. We have a panel of people who will be with us for this session today, and you can see them. But we're working in a webinar format, and so it's a little bit different than you're accustomed to at the moment. We will have the chat on for a little bit, but that will be turned off, and then we'll be using the Q&A function to take questions from anyone who's out in the audience. So I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Sharon Thera. I'm the Executive Director of Education and Engagement at the BC Office of the Human Rights Commissioner. And I carry a Coast Salish name. My name is Tsitsi Waddlewit. It means the woman who walks with many. And I'm very happy to be here today from Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish territory in downtown Vancouver. I want to introduce you to Samaklin, Elder Mike Kelly, who is from the Shwahamel Nation of the Stalo people in the Fraser Valley, and he's here to do a welcome to the territory and share whatever he would like to begin and open our meeting today. Over to you, Samaklin.
Okay, thank you. I'd just like to welcome everybody to this meeting here today for what the meeting is about here today. My name is Samaklin. That's my ancestral name. Comes from my great-grandmother, her name was Semeglin. She changed her name to the male version and becomes Samaklin. So that's the name that I carry today for my ancestors. And thanking each and every one for joining in with the meeting here today. I'm just going to say a short prayer here, asking Creator God to be with us today and to help us with the words and with the questions and answers, and to bless each one that's here today, to watch over them, protect them, and all of the above for this meeting here. Thank you. Any questions or comments or from anybody? No.
Okay, Mike, you can go ahead.
Okay, if not, want me to talk about things I do, or?
The welcome to the territory, and I thought you were going to do a prayer for us.
That was the prayer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. We're very happy to be working with your region in the Fraser Valley today.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay, with that, I want to invite the panel to introduce themselves, and then I'd like to speak about some of the people who are in attendance in the call today. So I'll open it up to our guest, who is with Chilliwack Community Living. So I'll just ask Julie to introduce herself.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Julie Younger, and I'm the Executive Director with the Chilliwack Society for Community Living.
Thank you. And our staff team today?
I can start. My name is Margot D'Arcangelo, and I'm Manager of Education with the office. And I'm working at home today on Lekwungen territory, otherwise known as Victoria. And I'm really glad to be in this conversation with you all today, bringing your areas of passion and your lived experience and your areas of expertise. So glad to be sharing space with you all.
Hi everyone, my name is Emily Chen. I'm the Research and Engagement Coordinator with the Office of the Human Rights Commissioner. Really happy to be here with you all. I'm calling in from the unceded traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples, also known as Vancouver. I think I'll jump in now as well and just give a bit of an overview about the webinar functions, which I think...
Can we just have Kasari introduce her, just say her name?
Sure.
Hi everyone, I'm Kasari Govender. I'm the Human Rights Commissioner, and I'm so pleased that we have this time together to talk and learn, and I hope to hear from many of you what's happening in your communities and in the work that you are doing. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. And you'll see a name as well on the screen. I don't know if Kim will speak, but Kim is doing our captioning for us. And so if any of you need closed captioning, please do turn on your button. And Kim is gracefully typing away as we speak today. So welcome to Kim. Sorry, Emily, you can go ahead.
No worries, thank you. I just wanted to verbalize some of the webinar options so that everyone on the call is familiar. I know some of you might be familiar with Zoom meetings, and as Sharon mentioned before, the webinar functions are a little bit different. So I just want to make sure everyone knows how to use them. So you'll only see the panelists speaking visible on screen. That's one difference. You'll also see at the bottom, there's a Q&A button. So feel free throughout the whole conversation to add any questions you have into that Q&A box, and we'll try our best to answer your questions and comments. We do have the chat function as well that's available. If you have some technology related concerns, we can help you out over there. And we'll close that in about 15 minutes. And Also keep your eye out in the Q&A. If we have any written announcements we want to make for everyone, we will post a question in the Q&A box, and you'll see it's from the BC Office of the Human Rights Commissioner. So we might make comments in there. And finally, with the closed caption button, there's a closed caption button at the bottom of your screen. So you can just click that button and then choose the show subtitles option, and then the captions will show up for you. So thank you again. Looking forward to hearing more.
Okay, we've had everyone introduce themselves, and we wanted to share with you a little bit about who is attending the session today. So we're going to share with you a list of organizations that are present. And I wanted to mention the mayor of the city of Chilliwack is trying to attend. So Mayor Ken Popov may be on the line. Welcome. And also the District of Mission has the manager of human resources attending as well. Thank you all. Okay, so you can see from the list that we've got quite a number of different groups attending, all the way from the Métis Nation of BC to the South Fraser Active Living Group, CUPE, the District of Mission, the University Women's Golf Club, the Tri-Cities Pride Society, the BC Liquor Distribution Branch, BCIT. And I should mention that I'll be reading out all of the slides that we put up as an accessibility measure for people who have difficulty seeing. So I'll try to get through the names. I won't go through all of them, but I'll try to read quite a number of them. So Access Stickers Project, the Dixon Transition Society, the Forensic Hospital, the Fraser Valley Métis Association, BC People First, BC Nonprofit Housing, BC Federation of Labor, Archways Community Services, and Davis Transition Society. We've got the Tri-Cities Seniors Planning Network, the Stalo Service Agency, the South Fraser Active Living Group, Métis Nation, and Ministry of Social Development. We've also got Maple Ridge Pit Meadows, Catesy, and I can't see it because it's behind my screen, Community Response Network, the Love, Peace and Harmony Foundation. Who doesn't want to work there? The Langley School District, l'Alliance des Femmes de la Francophone Canadienne, Hope and Area Transition Society, and the Fraser Valley Métis Association, which I mentioned already. Okay. So I wanted to spend some time just taking a quick look at the agenda and what we'll be doing. But before that, let's share the poll that we began in the opening session. So we just wanted to know what the weather was like where you are. And while you're doing that, we'll pull the agenda up. Oh, it's sunny right where you are. That's very exciting. It's sunny where we are too. And the vast majority of people are only getting us a small amount of time to be out in the sun. I hope that improves over August. And we're very happy to see why you joined the session today. We will be talking about the office, more about the office, so you'll get to learn more about that. And we'll talk also about the BC Human Rights Code and talk about some of the issues in human rights in the province today. All right, just to give the last of you a few more minutes to vote. Oh, there's just one person who's in a cloudy situation. All right, thank you very much. Let's move on to the agenda then. Today, we will be covering, we've done the opening and the introductions. We've talked a little bit about the Zoom process. I'll invite Julie to speak a little bit about the accessibility functions in the call shortly. And then we want to share a little exercise with you about why you might want to attend such a session. We will move into the commission presentation and and then we'll have a community discussion phase, a little bit of an evaluation, and a closing. We do have a break scheduled at around the halfway mark, so we'll take a 5-minute break and we show a little video in the session when that's going on. All right, so with that, I'm going to ask Julie to talk a little bit about the accessibility functions that we have in the call today.
Perfect, and forgive me for turning off my video. I got a message that I have unstable internet, so sometimes shutting off the video can help with that. We have 4 accessibility notes today. So the first one Sharon already mentioned, that all written information will be read out loud, so no one will miss anything on the slides. Secondly, we've created a toll-free number for people to participate via phone call, so without having to incur any fees. Third, we have tried to make our visual materials accessible as well, but would appreciate any feedback participants might have to help us make this better. And finally, if you used your phone to call into the meeting today and would like to raise your hand, press *9. Thanks, Sharon.
Thanks so much, Julie. So we're doing a lot of work in communities, and we'd like to make sure that people who need to reach us can reach us, and that the meetings are as accessible as possible. So really happy to be able to include those functions today. In addition, we wanted to get some feedback from you about why you might want to participate in a session like this today. What is it that brought you to this kind of session? So Margot is going to launch Ventimeter and ask you to contribute some reasons why you might be wanting to participate in this session today.
You'll be able to see in the chat that Emily's just added a link. So if everyone could go to the chat and click on that link, a list will appear and you can put in one of the reasons that you came today, multiple reasons you came today, and just what brings you to this conversation. And then I will share a screen as it appears live. So all of our answers will be seen at the same time together. So just give people a few seconds to do that, and I will switch over to that slide.
Okay, so these are some of the things that people wanted to see today. It's jumping, Margot.
It'll continue to move as people keep adding answers. So it changes as our answers change.
So right now we're not able to see the word map. We just have the enter a word in screen.
Here, hold on 1 second. There we go. Apologies for that.
We're just too fancy.
Too fancy. Can you see now? Can you see
Yes.
the word map? Perfect.
So people are wanting to join here. The call today for inclusion reasons, for disability rights, for information, for learning.
There's community, I see, change, best practices.
To treat people fairly.
Acceptance, discussion, anti-racism, role of commissioner, excitement.
These are all reasons to join the call today, and hopefully we'll cover some of these. For sure, we'll be talking about inclusion and disability rights and human rights and anti-racism. And we'll talk about the statutes, I see that. The priorities of the commission we'll definitely talk about. We'll give human rights information. All right. So just a quick word to you about this word map, that the larger the words, the more of you have mentioned that in your contribution. So inclusion seems to be one of the biggest issues that most people wanted to mention today. All right, thank you for that. With that, I'd like to move into introducing the commissioner, and the commissioner will share with you some information about the office, and after that, we will have a little bit of a discussion or a couple of questions, and then we will talk a little bit about the code. So with that, I will introduce to you Kasari Govinder, who took office as BC's first independent Human Rights Commissioner in September of 2019. So a very short time now. Her role is to lead the promotion and protection of human rights in British Columbia through the Office of the Human Rights Commissioner. Kasari has devoted her life to promoting human rights with a focus on the rights of those most marginalized and vulnerable. She's passionate about using her skills as a lawyer and a community builder to create a more equal and just BC. And I can attest to that. She's very passionate about human rights issues. I'll get notes from her and questions from her about the smallest details all the way to the largest picture that you can think of in the province. And she thinks and eats and sleeps human rights. She's worked very closely with organizations and communities promoting gender equality, Indigenous rights, children's rights, the rights of people with disabilities, and the rights of migrant communities. She served as the executive director of the West Coast LEAF, which some of you might be familiar with, as well as she was pivotal in establishing the Rise Women's Legal Center, which is a nonprofit legal center clinic in British Columbia. She earned her law degree from the University of Victoria and then her master's degree in international human rights law from the University of Oxford in the UK. She was a member of the board of the University of Victoria, Pivot Legal Society, the Coalition of Public Legal Services, and the Society for Children and Youth. She's taught as an adjunct professor of law at the University of British Columbia and as an instructor at Simon Fraser University. In 2019, she was awarded by the Women's Lawyers Forum with their Award of Excellence. She's a mother, an aunt, a daughter, and a sister. And I'd like to welcome her here to share some information about the new role and about the Office of the Human Rights Commissioner.
Thank you, Sharon. And thank you again to everybody who's joining us here today. It's such an important time to connect together, but also to be talking about human rights. It goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway, that we find ourselves in extraordinary times. And in my view, it's never more important to talk about human rights than when we are in crisis. So I think it's, I'm honored that you made the time to come and talk to us today, but I know that for many of you, you're motivated by the human rights issues that you see in your own lives and in the work you are doing. And we want to honor that in the course of this conversation and really listen to the experiences that you're here to share. So we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about the human rights protections and responsibilities that we all share in BC, and to use that conversation as a jumping off point to open up the call to hear from you. I'm going to talk about the different layers of human rights protections to start off with. So many people are aware of the UN human rights protections. They've heard of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, but they don't always know about how those layers of rights interact with each other, or how that interacts with our protections, the BC Human Rights Code. What does that all mean? How do all these pieces fit together? So I want to talk about that. Sharon will then do a little bit of a deeper dive into the Human Rights Code itself and how it works. And then I'll talk a bit about our office and the watchdog function we play, how you can contribute to that. And then we'll share with you our strategic priorities that we're working on in hopes of getting some feedback from you about how you see those issues reflected in your lives and your work, and where you'd like to see us going with those. So I hope that fits, I think, from the word cloud that we saw building there. I think we saw many of these issues, and we saw that from the survey. I do see a lot of interest in exploring a number of specific human rights issues, including accessibility and issues concerning people with disabilities. And I hope we can dive into that deeper during the question period as well, in the discussion period. Thank you so much, Mike, for recognizing the homelands that many of you find yourselves on today. Thank you for starting us off in such a good way. I'm here in Vancouver, in East Vancouver, on the territories of the Coast Salish peoples, including the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish peoples. And in the tradition of some of BC's First Nations, a territorial acknowledgement is, of course, more than just recognizing the territory we're on. It's also an introduction of who we are in this place. And so I want to talk about what brought me here to this place, who I am, and the work that I do here. So I come to this place from a family of migrants and settlers. Part of my family comes from South Africa, so I was very much shaped by the forces of systemic racism in the form of apartheid South Africa, and how that impacted the Indian community, which included my family, during the many years of apartheid. I also come to this work from a long line of social justice activists, including a mother who spent her life working on violence against women and children primarily. And it's out of this context that I've spent the last decade of my life working on human rights issues, particularly gender equality issues, before I started this role. And that I've spent it using law as my chosen tool for social change, although I'm sure many on this call have many other chosen tools as well. And we'll talk a little bit about the many tools in our tool belt. So I offer this introduction as a means of placing myself in context on these lands and in this work, and also as a means of expressing gratitude for the nations on whose land I find myself. I reflect in the many, many Zoom calls that I have, and I'm sure many of us are having every day, of how important it is, even more perhaps than when we're in person, to really stay grounded on the land that we are in as we meet in these virtual spaces. We meet in the clouds, but we've got our feet on the ground. And it's important to, I think, to acknowledge that and to ground our work in that. So if we could go to the slideshow, please, Margot. Thank you. I want to start with a fundamental question. What are human rights anyway? What are we here to talk about? And there are many different ways of answering that question. If I could get the next slide, please, Margot. Human rights are an idea. It's the idea that we're all born entitled to certain fundamental rights just for being human. Human rights is also an approach. It can be understood as a framework for guiding us in creating laws and policies that seek to empower people impacted by human rights issues, to involve them in the development of laws and regulations impacting their lives, and as a framework to hold government accountable for the decisions that they're making. Human rights is also a very concrete set of rights which are enforceable in different ways based on different levels of law. So that's where I want to start to delve into a little bit more today. So for you living as a person in BC, there are basically three levels that exist in human rights protections. I've already mentioned them briefly. International, constitutional, and statutory levels of rights protections, and they all work differently. So that's where I'll go to next. If you could bring the next slide up for me, please, Marco. Thank you. International human rights law governs the relationship between the state or the government and individuals. It's technically binding, but it is difficult to take international human rights to Canadian courts and say, my rights are being violated and I deserve a remedy or a resolution to this problem. So in reality, while they're binding, they also represent an aspirational set of human rights, what we aspire to live up to. Along those same lines, it's a very broad range of rights, everything from an adequate standard of living to protections against genocide, protections against torture, the right to food, a huge wide range of rights. And it does represent this kind of body of thought or obligation that Canada has signed onto voluntarily. For the most part, we've signed many of the international declarations and their protocols, which are the way to start to enforce them. And the main way of holding governments to account on international human rights obligations is through activists and lawyers and people on the ground, working on the ground, holding our governments to account, which is particularly effective in a country like Canada, where we have, first of all, a fairly open media, and also we have a country that generally prides itself on doing well on human rights. So if we can point to where the international community has said, you know, actually, Canada, you're not doing so well, this is a way to push our government to act. So that's, you know, as I said, there's so much going on in the international realm, and we can pretty much everything you can think of as a human right is contained there. So then we move to constitutional law, the next kind of layer of human rights protections, we'll see that it deals with a narrower range of rights. So constitutional law, this is really our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. It governs as well the relationship between the government and us as individuals, as organizations, as more private entities. So it's really, again, about how the government treats us and not so much how we treat each other. The Charter of Rights and Freedoms is fully binding on governments and agents of government, and it's enforceable through Canadian courts. So this is quite a powerful tool of human rights protections. This means that a province or the federal government can't pass a law that violates a term of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And it also means that government actors like police officers can't violate your rights. And if one of those things happens, you have the ability to bring that to court, to launch a constitutional challenge, which is no small feat. So while this is a very powerful tool of change, there are significant issues of being able to access this tool and actually bring a claim to court and use that to enforce the Constitution. So let's move then to, sorry, I forgot one piece on this slide, which is that the rights protections by the Constitution or by the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, those two things, the Constitution is a bit of a broader term. The Charter of Rights and Freedoms is one of the important documents as part of the Constitution. And this protects a narrower range of rights, so civil and political rights, which are really things like freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, so our ability to protest or to form unions, our right to equality, our right not to be subject to the death penalty, your rights on arrest. So these are the kinds of things that fall within civil and political rights. The kinds of rights I was talking about in international law, like the right to food, for example, or an adequate standard of living, are really not protected here under the Constitution. So if I can take to the next slide. The third area of rights, and we're going to delve most deeply into this area, this is the law that's contained in statutes. So we're calling it statutory law, but what we're really talking about here is the BC Human Rights Code. That's the law in BC. There's also the Canadian Human Rights Act, which applies in BC, but applies to federal entities like banks or the internet or aerospace. So very specific areas that the federal government's responsible for. Much of the areas that we interact with in our daily lives are covered by the BC Human Rights Code. And this governs relationships, not necessarily between the government and individuals, but between individuals. So if your employer discriminates against you, this is the tool you can use to get justice in that case. These laws are fully enforceable, but not so much through the courts. You can't go to the court and say, my rights under the BC Human Rights Code were violated. You need to file a complaint with the BC Human Rights Tribunal. And again, I'll flag this that we're going to get to a little bit more of those details and the practical details of what that entails a little bit later on. The rights that are covered under statutory law under the BC Human Rights Code are just the narrow but important rights around non-discrimination. So your rights to equality, which also are covered, that rights to equality are the only areas, and non-discrimination are the only area that's covered in all 3 rights protections. That's how significant it is. So this really gets at our ability to be substantively equal to each other, or to be treated equitably to each other. And really the vision of equality in all 3 of these layers of protections is about not treating us all exactly the same. That's not the Canadian legal definition of equality. It's about recognizing all of our differences between each other and how unique we all are, and ensuring that the law incorporates and accommodates those differences, to respect differences so that we can reach equality. So ensuring that we have the equal ability to, you've probably seen a little meme that's like, to see over the fence. That we all have the ability, no matter how tall we are, to see over that fence. And so that might mean that some people who are shorter need an extra bit of boost, but the point is that we're all equally able to see over that fence. So I'll just pause there and pass it over to Sharon to tell us a little bit more and do a bit of a deeper dive into the specifics of the Human Rights Code.
So before I do that, let's have a quick question that we have from Julie, who's got a question for you, as we're talking about the different types of human rights laws that are available. So there are international rights, there are constitutional rights, and then there's the statutory rights, which are BC specific. And Julie, I think you were going to ask a question.
Yes. So given what Kasari has said in regards to the international human rights, how would somebody go about making a complaint from an international human right?
So some of the international conventions have what's called an optional protocol. So it's an additional document that it requires countries to sign on to that additional document. So that's a little bit of a hitch here. You can sign on to the main document and say, we are committed to children's rights, but you don't necessarily have to sign on to say, and we think this is enforceable. If the countries sign on to optional protocols, so for example, Canada has signed on to CEDAW, which is the Bill of Rights for women's rights. Canada signed on to that convention as well as to the optional protocol. And there's a committee in charge of each of these important international conventions, separate committees, committees of experts. They're appointed from different countries, but they're not there to represent their countries. They're there because they're experts in that area. And their job partly is to deal with these kinds of complaints that come in. So a complaint came in, I believe it was the Yukon. It's possible it was Northwest Territories, but I believe it was Yukon, some years ago, for a woman who felt she was discriminated against by the provision of legal aid, that she was not able to get legal aid. She was experiencing violence, and she sought that help at the UN, and she filed a complaint under the optional protocol, and she did get a favorable decision. That was somewhat successful, somewhat not. It's again still a tool of advocacy to try to push governments to act rather than force them to act.
Thanks, Kasari. So that's a little bit different from constitutional rights. So we hear all the time that people make constitutional challenges. Can you explain a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, so I mentioned that there's some obstacles in terms of access to justice, but some examples that you might know from constitutional challenges are there was a fairly large challenge against the prohibition against sex work, for example, some years ago. That's something that was pretty high profile at the time. Another one would be physician-assisted suicide. A large case filed about the ability of people to choose to die where they have illnesses that cause great suffering or are terminal. And so those are some examples of cases. Now, both of those cases, while they involved individuals, were actually largely organized and supported by nonprofit organizations. So it often takes advocacy organizations like my former organization, West Coast Leaf, or like BC Civil Liberties Association or the Canadian Civil Liberties Association, a rights-based organization like that, to be able to back up individuals bringing these claims, because it's often hard for individuals to launch such a large-scale legal initiative. The good side about them is that they can result in very important human rights changes and really important progress, like legalizing same-sex marriage, for example.
Great, thanks so much for that. I think there's always this this distinction, but we don't necessarily know the difference. And so I would like to move on to speak a little bit about the BC Human Rights Code, which is the next level of human rights laws. And I noticed that in the Q&A that Mark asked a question about accessibility rights, and we'll talk a little bit about how the office can work with notions of discrimination around certain kinds of rights. And as a part of that, I wanted to just put up a poll to get you thinking about the BC Human Rights Code. So this one is asking about various grounds that are protected under the BC Human Rights Code. And I wanted you to just take a quick minute to have a look at those, and I'll discuss them in a little bit greater detail after we finish the poll. So I'll give you a few minutes to think about these questions. And the first one is asking, which of the following is not a protected ground in BC? And there are a number of grounds listed there. And then which of the following areas are protected under the code is the second question. And the code really gets into the nitty-gritty of the BC picture, what you can actually do as a person who lives in BC in terms of remedies. So it looks like we've got people involved in working on the polls so far. Give it a go. So we've got about 72% voted. We'll stop maybe when we get to about 75%. Oh, we're at 78, yay. All right, so let's take a look at that then. Overwhelmingly, you said that weight was not included in the BC Human Rights Code, and you are correct, yay. A big hand for you. In addition, there's another ground here that's not covered under the code, and that is the last one that's listed there. It's poverty. Many people think it's included in the BC code, but it's not included, and we'll talk a little bit more about that after that ground afterwards. So these grounds are valid in certain areas under the code, and I'll explain a little bit more about that, the areas later. But we were wondering which of the areas are not covered under the code, and overwhelmingly, well, not overwhelmingly, but a majority of you said that housing was the area that's not covered under the code. And it might surprise you that housing is included in the BC Human Rights Code, as are services and publications and employment. Interestingly, online publications are covered federally, not under the BC Human Rights Code.
Sharon, I think the question is which of the following areas are protected under the code?
Oh, which are protected, sorry.
Yeah. It's
I don't even know what my own code is saying. There you go. I'm just going home now. So all of these areas are covered under the code except for online publications. Thank you. Thank you for flagging that for me. All right, can I get the next slide up then? So we wanted to just map for you the BC Human Rights Code, and this is it. There are 4 areas that are covered, and those are the ones on the 4 corners: the employment, housing, services, and written publications. And these are the grounds that are covered under each of those 4 areas. Some of them are limited. So for instance, source of income is covered only under housing. Criminal conviction only under employment. And so there are different limitations, and I'll share those with you afterwards. But basically in BC, you are protected against discrimination on any of those grounds. And my screen has gone away. There it is. And can I get the next slide then, please? So here's a different way of looking at the grounds that are covered. And all of the areas in blue means that they're covered in those particular areas. So for instance, gender identity and expression are protected under employment, housing tenancy and services, as well as publications. Whereas age, for instance, is not covered exclusively under the purchase of property, buying a house. It is covered if you are renting a house. And that means that, for instance, there could be buildings that are age restricted, and so that might not be an area that you could claim discrimination in. And so to go back to Mark's question about disability, you'll see that disability is covered under the code. And as a result, that means that if a person is being discriminated against based on their disability, that they have a remedy through the BC Human Rights Code. All right, thank you so much for that. And with that, we have a break scheduled at this time. We'd like to take just a quick 5-minute break, and we'll show a video, and we'll run the video twice for those of you who are stepping away to go for a little bit of a break, so that you won't miss any part of it. We'll run it twice, and then we'll come back and move into the second part of our discussion. And then after the second part, we'll move into open the discussion around community issues and concerns. So thank you all. See you shortly.
My name is Fraser. I like cherry tomato, clean olives, and mayonnaise sandwich. I am 55 and I'm now activate. I'm an artist, author, and a poet. And I own Down syndrome, but I am capable. That's all CCAC said. I couldn't make my own decision. The CCAC said I couldn't decide where I live. Or who cares for me? That is wrong. It's my own right to decide.
And you didn't want to live in a nursing home, did you?
No, I know. No, that's wrong. It's my decision where I live. I do not want to live in a mansion. That's not nice. from Vancouver, Caption, and Habit Tree. I want to build James and Frankie and Teresa. The community is helping us. I love my human rights. Pretty amazing. Right, me. Like cherry tomato, clean olives, and mini sandwich. I am 55 and I'm so activate. I'm an artist, author, and a poet. And I don't Down syndrome, but I am capable. I am a human right.
Do you like nursing homes?
No. That's all CTAC said. I couldn't make my own decision. The CTAC said I couldn't decide earlier. I who cares for me? That is wrong. It's my human right to decide.
And you didn't want to live in a nursing home, did you?
No, I know. No, that's wrong. It's my decision where I live. I do not want to live in a religion. That's not nice. Now I'm in the community. I'm from Vancouver, Caption, and Habit Tree. I want to build James and Frankie and Teresa. The community is helping us. I love my human rights. Pretty amazing. Right, me.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I see that questions are coming up in the Q&A. I will answer most of the questions that have come up because they'll be relevant to the next segment of our discussion. But I would like to answer one question that relates to the last discussion that we've been having about international human rights and constitutional human rights. So I'll ask Kasari about this one, which is from Shelley, and Shelley asks, can I go straight to the UN Human Rights Tribunal and bypass provincial and federal human rights tribunals?
Thanks for that question, Shelley. It's a really important clarification because you can't actually. Well, for the most part, you can't. You can in some circumstances, but you need to have exhausted your domestic remedies before you go internationally. What that means is you have to have used whatever avenues you can in BC or in Canada before you jump to the international stage and file a complaint with an international body. There are times, though, where there aren't ways to resolve complaints domestically because we don't have the same legal protections. Or your complaint is about the very process that you're challenging. So, for example, the complaint about legal aid, she was saying, I have no avenue for redress here. I don't have the support to be able to file a claim here. And so there's some important exceptions to having to go through a tribunal or a court before you get to the international stage. But you do have to turn your mind to, is there someone I can bring this to in Canada? Have I used every avenue that I can domestically before I go internationally? So thanks for that question.
Okay, with that, we'll move on to a discussion about the BC Office of the Human Rights Commissioner, our office, and what it is we're doing.
Great. Thank you, Sharon. So as Human Rights Commissioner, my office works to address the root causes of inequality, discrimination, and injustice in BC by shifting laws, policies, practices, and cultures. Our goal is a province in which everyone's human rights are realized and our responsibilities to one another are fulfilled. So the slide here shows the vision and the mission statement, or the mandate statement, I should say, for the organization. This is the big lofty goal that we are working towards in setting up this new office. Next slide, please. I want to spend some time sort of whittling that down a little bit. What does all that mean? So one of the pieces that's important to understand about how we're set up is that we are an independent officer of the legislature, which means that I don't report to government, I don't report to a ministry or a minister, but I report directly to the legislature. So the distinction there is that the way that independent offices of the legislature are set up is free from the ups and downs of the political world. Our budget is not controlled by government, nor am I hired by government. I was hired by an all-party legislative committee that had to agree unanimously. So in this case, the Greens stepped out of this committee for unrelated reasons, and there were 2 NDPs and 2 Liberals on the committee that appointed me, and they had to agree unanimously, and the legislature then actually voted me in, unanimously accepted that recommendation. And I think that's really important and speaks to our independence. We are an entirely nonpartisan office, and we also don't run on election cycles. We are hopefully going to be around for a long time and have been set up in a more sustainable way than perhaps an office of the government would be, which is more bound to go with the political tides. Next slide, please. So our office is also fits into a larger system of human rights. So many of you may know that there was not a Human Rights Commission for 17 years. It was canceled in 2002 and wasn't reinstated until September of 2019. But what did exist all this time was a process by which to adjudicate individual complaints. So if you had a complaint under the Human Rights Code that we've just talked about, or for example, you feel like you were discriminated against by your employer, you could bring that claim to the BC Human Rights Tribunal. that tribunal is like a court almost, but more accessible than that. So those folks will help you mediate or settle your complaint, or will take it to full hearing if that's what's required. There's another piece to this system, which is the Human Rights Clinic. You're going to hear a little bit more about this after I'm done speaking in a few minutes. But the clinic is a service that's run through an organization called Community Legal Assistance Society. And this is a group of lawyers and advocates who can help you bring your complaint to the tribunal and help you move that case along. There are also services in other parts of the province that do this work. And we do have that more complete list. But for those in the Fraser Valley, it's good to know that there's a clinic in Vancouver that has jurisdiction to work across the province and funding to work across the province to represent complainants. And if you're a respondent in a complaint, you do have also an ability to seek some assistance through a clinic in Victoria, which also has a mandate to work across the province, and that's the Law Centre. The key difference of where we fit into this picture is that both the tribunal and the clinic deal with individual complaints. So individual incidences of racism or ableism or so on, and there's a way to resolve those individual complaints. What was missing from that system for 17 years was the ability to redress systemic concerns. So systemic human rights issues don't just impact one individual, but are really about bigger systems like public policies, institutional practices, legal norms, or cultural norms that act to perpetuate or maintain human rights violations. And so that's where my job comes in. Next slide, please. The role of a Human Rights Commission is to provide access to justice on those issues that the individual complaint system can never really address. We are charged with examining the underlying causes of discrimination rather than just the individual manifestations of it. So we exist to tackle the systemic human rights issues and to address the systemic obstacles that stand between us and kind of the lofty goals of the Human Rights Code or the Constitution. This is a free and just society. What stops us from doing that? And that's what we are here to unpack. And I've just given you a quote from Robin DiAngelo, who's the author of the book White Fragility. And she said, racism is a structure, not an event. And I think it's an important distinction. I actually think there are many events of racism, but what underlies those events are a set of beliefs and cultural norms, and again, laws and policies that hold all these, that allow these events to occur. And so we're really here to be in somewhat of a preventative role and to get at those larger issues, not just to deal with events after they happen. We're here to be in a more proactive role rather than just reacting to incidences, again, of racism or ableism or misogyny that occur. Many of you will have heard, of course, about the rise of racism and violence in BC over the past few years, and especially during COVID. For example, there was an incident in Abbotsford earlier this year that demonstrated the impact of interpersonal racism on those who experience it and witness it. On June 5th, Abbotsford residents came together in a historic demonstration of solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement and to bring attention to systemic racism in Canada. At the time, over 300 members of the community attended the rally and put together a peaceful memorial with flowers and art and candles and more to honor the victims of police violence and to create an opportunity for people to share in that grief and that outrage. The next morning, the community woke up to find that their memorial had been vandalized. The posters were torn down, the flowers and the candles were destroyed, and many things were set on fire. The anti-racism activists who had organized this protest did not allow the vandalism to stop them, and they encouraged folks to come out and to help rebuild that memorial. And they also called on the city of Abbotsford, to make a public statement condemning the act. And indeed, on June 11th, Mayor Henry Braun acknowledged that we are not immune to systemic racism in Canada. And of course, we are not. This example of hate and white supremacy is by no means an isolated one. In fact, the recent statistics on hate crimes across Canada show that there were 1,800 incidences of of hate reported to police in 2018, and 43% of those cases were motivated by racism. One community that has particularly experienced the rise of race-related racism, or racism rather, during COVID-19 is the Asian community, or Asian Canadian community. And I just saw a news article over the weekend that racist incidences against Asian Canadians have increased by nearly 9 times what they were at this point last year. For 2020. So that statistic around 1,800 incidences reported to police was from 2018. We're going to see much, much higher numbers this year. And again, BC is a particular hotbed for this kind of activity. Not something that we want to be distinguished by. Of course, the 9 times statistic is just those incidences that have been reported to police. And we know that the real numbers are many higher. The stories that we hear of racism and hate, I think for many of us are really destabilizing and raise some big questions about what kind of communities we live in and what kind of communities we want to live in. But as important and as poignant as these examples are, they only tell us a bit about racism and its impacts in BC. There's another piece of the picture, because these incidences are supported by entire systems of cultural attitudes and laws and policies that support this kind of action. So here I want to tell a different kind of story to illustrate what I mean by systemic discrimination. In June of 2019, after enduring a C-section delivery in Kamloops, an Indigenous couple was of course elated to meet their first child, a baby girl. But less than 19 minutes after giving birth, social workers came into the hospital to take the baby, saying they'd had a report of neglect. At that time, the maternal grandmother was there and she was able to hold off the apprehension for the time being. But 2 days later, social workers returned. The mother was asleep with a sedative that had been administered to her by the medical staff, and the child was removed from her care while she was unconscious. For months after this apprehension, the family wrestled to have their child returned to them. And at one point, even 2 social workers began supporting this family in their hearings and helping them navigate the system, recognizing that it was broken in so many places. Ultimately, in September of last year, the province of BC ended the controversial birth alert system. That's the system that allowed MCFD, allowed the ministry to go in and remove children straight from the hospital without providing supports to the family, without allowing that family to operate in the context of their family and their community to be able to parent in a supported way. This birth alert system had resulted in the separation of many, many infants from their parents, particularly Indigenous children, and was behind this particular removal of this child. But the policy change, while a really good step, of course, didn't reverse the damage for this family and to this child. It didn't change the fate of baby H, who is the child in this circumstance, who remains in the child protection system to this day while her parents continue to fight to get her back. And I think this story illustrates another side of racism that is perhaps less visible than the graffiti on the wall, which is also an important demonstration of racism. But this is also important because it doesn't necessarily require this kind of overt action, the racist slurs. It doesn't require it can happen even when people have good intents, and like the 2 social workers who tried to help this family, because it was the way the system is set up that was the problem, not whether any one person had ill intent. In BC, Indigenous children are still 15 times more likely to be apprehended into child welfare than non-Indigenous children. So to combat this kind of structural and systemic human rights abuse, compassion and empathy are really important starting points, but they are not enough to tackle the larger systemic issues. We have to take a structural approach. And so our office, as the Office of the BC Human Rights Commissioner, we have been set up in order to tackle systemic issues like this, in order to get at these roots of discrimination. And we all have a role to play in that. At the interpersonal level, there are important things that we can all do to protect our friends and our neighbors and to interrupt racism or ableism or misogyny when we see it. But at the structural level, you can also support bigger changes, engage in difficult conversations, participate in discussions around changing laws and policies, vote. These are ways that we can create a structural and systemic change. So to return to where we started, we are here together in the midst of course, this global pandemic on this pivot point for the world as we know it in so many ways. And as I said earlier, there's no more important time to defend human rights, to talk about human rights than in times of crisis. And I know when I say that, I'm preaching to the choir because you are all here because you feel this way too and do this work, and we're all in this work together. But I do believe that this disruption at this moment has created opportunities to reckon not only with interpersonal human rights issues, but also with structural and systemic ones as well. Huge changes have happened in very short order. Solutions that we previously thought were seemingly impossible happened very quickly. People were housed out of camps. Social assistance rates were raised, and there may be significant critiques of that, but I think it's also important for us to look at the kind of change that is possible and use that as a lever point for the change ahead, which is going to take a lot of work, but that's what we're here for. And again, I know many in this on this call are engaged in this kind of work. So thank you for listening, letting me share a bit about what we are up to. And I'm looking forward to the conversation now as we go forward.
Thanks, Kasari. I'd like to share a little bit with you about our office's strategic priorities. And then after that, we have a video. Somebody asked a question about the clinics and where all the clinics are in the province. But before we do that, before I share some information about what the clinics actually do in terms of the Human Rights Tribunal and complaints process, I wanted to share with you a little bit about what our strategic priorities are at the Office of the Human Rights Commissioner. And we have the slide up now. So we have 5 strategic priorities that we are focusing in on. And the first one we've been talking about, which is ongoing discrimination in the province. So those are the things that are covered and protected under the BC Human Rights Code. That's discrimination as prohibited in terms of ableism, in terms of gender and gender expression and identity, age, race, place of origin, all of those things will be a primary focus for us. And so we've had a couple of questions about whether we're focusing on these particular issues, and discrimination is going to be, for the life of the Commission, an ongoing priority. In addition to those, we have focused in and created some new work around these other areas, which is around decolonization. Because one of the things that we know for a fact is that in BC, while the largest number of complaints that come into the tribunal when it comes to race are presented by a number of different groups, Indigenous people are underrepresented in making those complaints. And we know that Indigenous people experience a lot of discrimination in many of the different grounds. And so we want to take a focus, and we want to look at how the human rights system is serving Indigenous people in the province. And so we're looking at decolonization of the system. And that means we're trying to look at the system from an Indigenous perspective, but also from a theoretical perspective that helps us to think about the ways that, that the system may be preventing certain groups from accessing it. Kasari brought up the slide that said that racism is a structure, and all of the issues on discrimination that we're talking about that focus on or that rely on a structure to reinforce them, that is, they work on a systemic level, that is where we're able to make a difference in the office. And so we want to look at the systems that are in place already in human rights in the province. Another one of these issues that is mentioned everywhere we go in the province is the issue of poverty, or under the law it's called social condition. And we have taken the view that we would like to see social condition added to the BC Human Rights Code, so that people who are not being actively discriminated against based on their income levels and based on how people think that they exist in the society, what their status is in the society. We want to make sure that people are not discriminated against based on poverty. We've talked a little bit, quite a lot about the rise of hate and white supremacy in the province, and we've made that a strategic priority. This was even before the COVID moment. We decided that we were going to spend some time thinking about how to address some of these issues across the province, because we do not want BC showing up this way in the rest of the world. We do not want those stats around racist incidents to be the defining characteristic of British Columbia. We know that BC cares for each other, that British Columbians are interested in the lives of each other. And so that is the world that we envision, and that's the province that we want to promote. And then as well, we want to look at human rights for those who are detained by the state. And so in those particular instances, we're thinking about incarceration or detention under the Mental Health Act, and also in police detention or in justice systems as well. We want to look at the rights of people who are detained involuntarily. And so those are our strategic priorities, and I would invite you to look at our website if you're interested in those, or if you want more information, please feel free to contact us. But very importantly, we want to hear from you what you think about these priorities. We want to know if you see examples of these in your community where you're living in the Fraser Valley, whether these are issues that you think are human rights issues that are important in the region that you're living in. So we would love to hear from you about these priorities. And when we go to the Q&A section, we'll take some of your questions on these particular issues. From here, we want to share a little bit with you about going back to the human rights system. We want to share a little bit with you about the Human Rights Clinic. And we have a video that's by Laura Track, who is the Director of Education at the BC Human Rights Clinic. That's the clinic that's run by the Community Legal Association, Legal Assistance Society in BC. And Laura is going to explain a little bit about what the clinics do in the complaints process.
So the Human Rights Clinic, as both Sharon and Kasari have noted, is part of the Community Legal Assistance Society, or CLASS for short. CLASS has been around since 1971, and we've been providing free legal services to low-income folks ever since that time. The Human Rights Clinic assists specifically with human rights complaints made under the BC Human Rights Code, so not charter challenges, not international human rights issues. There we go, hi. But specifically with complaints that people have made to the BC Human Rights Tribunal. We are located in downtown Vancouver, but our services are province-wide, so we will do our very best to assist people no matter where in the province they are. Like many of you, we have been exploring new technologies over the last couple of months, and so we are doing meetings with clients over the phone, by Zoom, and making it work no matter where people are. So we provide a range of different services to people who've made complaints or who are thinking of making complaints and looking for more information about their rights and their options. First, we have an information line. Folks can call any day of the work week, Monday to Friday, 9 to 4:30, I believe, to get more information about human rights, about how to file a complaint, where to go to get the form, and just sort of basic general information about human rights. That's staffed by a real live person. It's not a recording. You'll be able to talk to someone and get pointed in the right direction. And the right direction may mean making an appointment with our Monday short service clinic. We used to call it a drop-in clinic, but we're trying to move away from that language because we hope that people will make appointments rather than drop in. And especially while we're offering these services online, it's helpful that people can make an appointment. But we do have these appointments available to anyone, again, anywhere in the province, whether you filed a complaint or not. Doesn't matter what your income is, doesn't matter what stage of the process you're at. You can make an appointment for a half an hour session with a lawyer or an advocate. We run these every Mondays, and we'll talk to you about your issue, your complaint, and give you some general advice and information to help you figure out what to do next. The next service that we offer is legal advice and representation. So the other two services are available to anyone at any point. To apply for legal advice and representation, you do have to have filed your human rights complaint already and have that complaint accepted for filing by the tribunal. So when you file your complaint, which is totally free to do, the tribunal will take some time to screen it and make sure that it's something that they can deal with. And provided that it is, they'll send you a letter saying, okay, your complaint has been accepted for filing. Now the rest of the process will get underway. And at that point, you can send that to us at the Human Rights Clinic and apply for legal representation. And it's at this stage that we do have to do a bit of screening because we simply don't have the staff or the resources to provide a lawyer or an advocate to everyone that applies, but we'll look at your income and look at our capacity to assist and do our very best to match you up with a lawyer or an advocate that can help. In particular, we try to help people who need some assistance at mediations. That's generally the first step in a human rights complaint, is that the parties will see if they can resolve the complaint through mediation, and we'll try to provide some assistance for that. If we can't provide full representation, at the very least, we can usually provide you with some coaching and some consultations to help support you to represent yourself and just feel like you have a better understanding of the process and what you need to do. And the last service that we offer, a little bit different than representation and advice, but we offer education. So I speak to community groups all over the province all the time to help them understand what the code applies to, how it works, what discrimination means, and how to access and make meaningful those rights in your own life. We also do workshops and trainings for those who I really like this language that the commissioner is using, have responsibilities and are duty bearers under the Human Rights Code. So employers, landlords, other service providers, we help them understand their obligations, their duties, their responsibilities under human rights law. So we do workshops and trainings, again, around the province, usually in person, although lately we're doing lots by Zoom online, to help people understand both their rights and their responsibilities under the code. So that's a little bit about the clinic. I don't think I've mentioned this yet. Our services are totally free. We're funded by the provincial government for the most part to provide free legal services, so nobody has to pay for any of the advice or representation that they receive through our clinic. That was an important thing to make sure that I mentioned. Thanks again to the Commission for having me today.
And that was Laura Track from the BC Human Rights Clinic. And I was hoping that we could just throw up that slide about the three entities that make up the human rights system so that we could get a look at the difference between the organizations. Is Margot there? I just wanted to reinforce the fact that we're separate agencies, but we provide human rights in the province. And so the tribunal hears individual complaints. The clinic, which is where Laura is working and was just explaining their process, the clinic provides legal assistance for individual complaints. And we are the commission. We don't do individual complaints. We look at issues of systemic discrimination. So just wanted to reinforce that again, and then go on to the questions that are coming in through the Q&A process. So thanks, Margot. We'll just go back to the panel now. One of the questions that has come up, Kasari, is around stalking. And the person is wondering if stalking fits within a human rights framework.
Thanks, Sharon. So one of the key pieces of being able to fit within the complaint process is being able to know that the differential treatment you're receiving, the thing that's happening to you that you feel is discriminatory, is happening on the basis of certain grounds. So you need to be able to hang your hat on that. So if something's happening to you, and it needs to be with one of the defined areas of the code. So if something's happening to you where you're being harassed in the context of your employment on the basis of your gender, let's say, that could be stalking, and that could qualify under the Human Rights Code. So it really depends on the circumstances. There may be other times where the criminal justice system is the better avenue for you to deal with. So often stalking is dealt with through the criminal justice system, and there are provisions in the criminal code that are designed to get at exactly that issue. So it really depends on some of the context. But I do want to emphasize that you have to fit within one of those areas. Employment, housing, services are the main ones. And then you have to sort of find a ground of discrimination that is the basis of.
Great, thank you. So somebody else is asking about non-disclosure agreements and their fit in the human rights framework.
Yeah, so this is a hard one for sure. So often the tribunal, one of the ways that cases are often resolved is through settlement and mediation. And one of the pieces that goes along with that often is a non-disclosure agreement. So how that works is, a tenant will say, I'm being discriminated against here, and they meet with the landlord. They are able to come to an agreement about what resolution the tenant would like to see as a result of that discrimination. And in exchange, the respondent, in this case, the landlord, will often ask for it all to be kept private. And so that's what the non-disclosure agreement is, that nobody's allowed to talk about what happened there. While that is really problematic sometimes from the perspective of the individual who is being discriminated against, and even more so from the perspective of folks like us who want to be thinking about systemic change, because there's very little chance of systemic change if it's being isolated to that one incident. Nobody ever gets to learn from that. It doesn't get reported to the media. Other respondents don't learn, hey, if I do this thing, I might get a complaint against me, right? It doesn't raise awareness for respondents about what's against the law. So it has a lot of problems with it. The only thing is, it's often the only way resolution is reached. So it ultimately can be a really good tool for complainants who don't necessarily want to go through the whole process of a hearing. They don't have the time or resources or energy. It's a lot to go through, especially if you've just gone through something difficult or traumatic in your life, like being discriminated against or being excluded from something important in your life. And so it's often you want a quicker resolution. So those are some of the trade-offs, but definitely a hot debate in the human rights realm, and also actually in the realm of sexual harassment and discrimination, because it's a very live issue there as well. Sometimes somebody getting closure in their individual case versus the larger issues around resolution in society around these issues.
Great, thank you. Here's another code question, actually, and it's from Camille, and it's about, it says, can an employer legally take an employee who was bullied and harassed to court if they spoke out about the violence that they experienced?
So I can't answer definitively in your particular context without knowing more, but I will say that there is protection for people who both are whistleblowers within government. So that's one important area. That there is something called whistleblower legislation that was introduced quite recently, and the ombudsperson oversees that. So if you feel like if you work in the public sector and this has happened to you, you might want to talk to the ombudsperson to say, this is a retaliation against me for speaking out about something that was wrong. The other thing is you're protected in the human rights context. If you filed a human rights complaint or made a complaint about human rights issues within your workplace or against a duty bearer in general, someone can't make your life awful because you chose to do that in whatever way that works. They can't, create obstacles and make your living situation worse, create noise disturbances, or make your employment situation a more negative experience simply because you've spoken up about a human rights issue. And that's really important to know, and important to know that you can file a complaint about that as well.
Thanks for that. This is an issue that we've looked into, and Vince is wondering if we are looking into discrimination by shared riding services like Uber and so on.
Yeah, I'm not able to speak in much detail about what we're doing on that right now, but I do want to assure you that we are actively working on this issue. It's something sometimes we're able to work behind closed doors in a more efficient, effective way with government, just to be able to provide some confidential advice to government and be able to move issues forward. So very much on our radar. In fact, just this week, actively working on this issue, and very much something we've been hearing about through our info line, and also many of the consultations that we've been doing and engagements we've been doing. We've been hearing about many issues that people have with transportation in general, and specifically with rideshare concerns. So that has been articulated to us as an issue, and we are taking that one forward.
One of the things that happens, Kasari, is that we get mixed up with the Human Rights Tribunal. And I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about why we can answer questions about the tribunal in the first place. So if someone has a question for us about the tribunal, how are we connected to the tribunal exactly?
So we are totally separate entities. We do work collaboratively with them often because, as you can see from that slide, there's 3 parts to the system. I think there's ways in which it's important for us all to work together and build positive relationships to be able to make change in human rights in the province. But independence is an important part of how we operate as well. So we are not intertwined. There are some formal ways in which we interact. For example, we have a right to intervene in cases that raise a systemic component if we decide to do that. So what that means is that we don't get involved on either side of a complaint, but we come into an ongoing dispute and we can say, look, this issue, in addition to the specific issues it raises for the people here, it also raises a broader systemic issue about human rights. And that's called being an intervener in a case. And under the Human Rights Code, we have a right to intervene, a statutory right. So the tribunal can't deny us the ability to speak. They can define how we do that, whether we do that in written submissions or whether we get to bring our own witnesses or those kinds of pieces, but they can't define how we do it. So that's one way in which we formally interact with the tribunal. The other way is that they're sharing information with us not so that we can get involved as much in the individual cases, but more that we can identify some of the important trends that emerge from the tribunal. So for example, we know that disability claims are a very high proportion of the claims that are brought by the human rights, by complainants in the human rights process. And so we know that that's an important area for us to look at when we're looking at our first strategic priority around discrimination under the code. We know also that employment-related complaints are a very high number of the complaints. So again, helps us focus our gaze on where we need to be working. And so that's also a formal role, but otherwise we are separate entities and we just work together as different organizations and we collaborate on some key issues.
So having said that, I've got a tribunal question. Is the tribunal able to hear a class action suit on behalf of persons with disability?
Yeah, they don't call it a class action. They call it a representative complaint, but there are ways that people can band together to file complaints together. So it's not just one issue. And actually that's when there wasn't a commission, well, even now there is a commission, but even without a commission, it was a way for more systemic issues to be heard in this process that's really designed for individual complaints, but allows for these bigger issues for them to show, look, there's a pattern here, for example. That's an important part of the claim, is that we can show this pattern by bringing a whole bunch of different claimants to the tribunal to file a case.
Great, and I've got a long email. I don't think I'll read the entire thing, but I just wanted to raise it in terms of the notion of advocacy and what our role as an office could be in terms of advocacy, as opposed to what we can actually provide in terms of systemic investigation of discrimination. So this is an email from a person who is a disabled artist and disability activist. And the person says, I'm noticing a connection between the availability of disability-led autonomous non-institutional support services and self-identifying, self-determined disability-centered communities. Most of the medical and mental health services and accessibility programs that communities rely on are rooted in Western medical traditions, models that many politicized disabled people consider to be harmful to their sense of dignity and identity. And they talk about disability pride and disability arts. And the question really is about how can new accessibility and disability policy support the legacy of the disabled community here, so they're not just included, but understood as a vital part of the story of this place. And so it's not so much about discrimination, but where can political actions, in this particular case around disability, where can they be targeted?
Yeah, it's such an important question around how we really shift culture and shift ideas and how we operate, what our norms are. I mean, I can't say that I have a perfect answer to that by any means. It's certainly something that we are grappling with, and very much so. I mean, a couple of the places that we are trying to do exactly that, kind of shift the dial, we've got a storytelling project. You just saw the video about Teresa Pocock, which we were very honored to be able to do that as our first video. And we have an aim to produce a number of stories to really build understanding for all of us and build empathy for in many different contexts, not just around disability, but certainly an important piece. And the first ones we've filmed have all been focused on issues of disability. And really important, I think, in this way also to highlight how none of these issues are separate in our own lives, that we're not just somebody who might experience racism or just somebody who might experience ableism or misogyny, that usually we have a gender and the rest of our bodies, and we have all these aspects of our identity exist at the same time, which is part of building empathy, I think, is making this more complex than a more intellectual conversation that's really about building that human connection. So that's one way in which we're trying to shift culture, as opposed to just building an inclusion model into policy, is actually to shift culture. And another way is to do some big public awareness campaigns. And I know that one of our questions for you, in terms of you as participants, is really to, if you have ideas in your community, if we were to do public awareness work in your community, for example, we are working on a bus shelter campaign right now around racism. But if we were to do that kind of public awareness raising and destigmatization campaign in your community, what would you want to see us working on? What issues would you want to see us working on? And that's another way in which we're hoping to kind of do this kind of broader culture shift. And I'll just say one other thing, which is that we have this wonderful participation on the Q&A, and this question kind of points to this issue as well. not all of these are questions, and even if they are, we may not be able to answer all of them, but I just want to assure you and encourage you to keep writing these Q&As and thinking about if you have ideas to share with us about what you want to see in your community, the issues that you face or the people you work with face. This is all coming back with us to the office. Whether or not we have a chance to talk about it right now, this is influencing our work. So I really encourage you to keep writing our comments or write us afterwards. That'd be great as well.
I also want to add to that. I think that this is something that we're grappling with. How do we shift culture? How do we think about the type of society that we want to live in, and how do we move it in that direction? And so one of the ways we can do that is to work together. And I'm really grateful that you're bringing us your ideas, and I hope that you stay connected with us. We're coming back to the Fraser Valley for sure. We plan to be there 4 times a year. Is that right, Emily? 3. Okay. Yeah, maybe I was being ambitious and doing it to each region 4 times a year. But we do want to make sure that we're creating these connections so that we start building the networks across the province. And one of the things that we found is that these same questions that you're asking, they've been asking in the Northwest or in the interior or in Vancouver Coastal 2 weeks ago for sure. So we're hearing similar questions, but we're also hearing different ones as well. And I'm so excited that we're getting so many questions. We wanted to hear from you. We wanted to ask you some questions to hear what emerging issues are for you, but you're bringing them out to us already. And one of them that's come up is around one of the special functions that we have, and that's our inquiry function. And this question may not directly relate to something that we will do, but it kind of opens the conversation for us to talk a little bit about our inquiry function. And it's around the Right to Read Commission that the Ontario Human Rights Commission launched. And one of the people writing in wanted to know about whether BC has plans to do something similar.
Yeah, so just a little bit of background here. We do have the ability, and talked earlier about the many tools in our tool belts, and one of them is to launch public inquiries. That doesn't necessarily have to look like something huge, like the missing women inquiry that many of us followed in the news or participated in some way. It can look smaller than that or in different shape than that. As Sharon just pointed out, a couple of key examples of that are from the Ontario Human Rights Commission, which we have some similarities in how we're set up. Although we're set up in a fairly unique way in the country, we do share an important function with the Ontario Human Rights Commission, which is the ability to do these kinds of inquiries. And they've done, they have 2 actually active ongoing right now. And one of them is on racial profiling in the Toronto Police Service. And the other is the Right to Read inquiry. And so they are conducting that across the province, although that's had to shift a little bit with the COVID context because they were in the midst of doing those hearings in person as they traveled across the province. And both of those have given us some really good ideas, as well as the feedback I've received in many different forms, including these engagement sessions and including on social media and through some other community meetings, about the significance of the human rights issues for young people who are dealing with their own disabilities and learning concerns in the context of the public school system. So very much on our agenda. We're in the process right now of trying to prioritize some of the work for our first inquiries, which have a number of considerations for us. We don't get these inquiry powers until September. They were delayed for a year. They were the piece of the act that was passed by the legislature, but the government didn't bring it into force, which meant we couldn't actually do anything with inquiries until starting in September. So we are in that planning process and sort of needs assessment stage right now. As you might imagine, the list of possible topics is long. The debates in our office about which topics get taken forward are passionate. And there are, it's a hard decision to make about which topics we're going to take forward first. But I will say for sure that the right to read and learning disabilities, and more broadly, children and young people with disabilities, and how the school system is treating them and their families is a really important issue that's on our list.
Thanks for that. Here's one that's specific to human rights in the province, and it's around students with disabilities who've been prevented from graduation, for example, because of their disability. School districts stalled on following through on promises until the student aged out. Is this the type of situation that would be considered a human rights violation, as the student had proof of abilities?
Well, it would be something that I think you could very easily talk to, not easily, that's the wrong word, but I think would be a good fit to talk to class or another clinical service in your community to explore the human rights implications of that particular case. But certainly education, I will say that obviously disability is a prohibited ground of discrimination under the code, meaning you can't discriminate on the basis of disability. We've talked about that lots today. Education falls into services that are customarily available to the public. And there's a really important case that I worked on in my previous work coming out of North Shore, actually, a school system, the North Shore school system, where a young man, well, he was a young man by the time the case went through. He was a child when the case started, and he had severe dyslexia, and he was fighting against the lack of services available to him, and fought that through the human rights system. And it went all the way up to the Supreme Court of Canada. As I say, the organization I worked for, I represented them in bringing that case forward as an intervener. And it was an important human rights issue of engaging exactly these issues. So while I can't answer your specific case because it's hard to answer without more context, and I'm not able to provide that kind of legal advice right now, I will say the Moore case from North Vancouver is an important example of how a similar issue, perhaps a similar issue, has been dealt with in the human rights system successfully.
Thanks so much, Kasari. We'd like to hear from you about the region. We've only got a few more minutes, and we wanted to ask you a couple of questions, and we had loaded up some questions that we wanted to hear from you about. We've heard about what you think are important issues in the region. We wanted to know then a little bit more about what you think we could be doing in terms of an awareness campaign for the Fraser Valley. What kinds of issues would you like to see addressed in your region? What are the kinds of things that you think that we need to focus on when we come to the region? What would you like to see the Human Rights Commission taking into consideration? And if we're developing materials and preparing materials, and really this is a question for me and my department, because we're in the midst of preparing materials for communities, you have a chance to tell us what it is, what information you need. So we've heard that you need more information about disability rights, so definitely we'll take that into account. But are there other types of issues that you're seeing in the Fraser Valley that you might like to see in terms of materials that we could be bringing to you or creating for you or gathering for you? Please let us know. This is a really good chance for you to let us know what those might be. So I'm going to go to the Q&A list to see if any of you would want to contribute some of that.
I wonder, Sharon, if just while people are thinking about that and typing in, if I did see a question at some point, I will say I'm not following the chat super carefully because it's a bit hard to do both at once. But I did, my eye was caught by one question that I know has been circulating on social media. So I just did want to take a moment to address that. And that's a potential, a difference in definition around income between the federal government and the provincial government. And I think if folks haven't had a chance to explore this issue with the ombudsperson, that may be the place to start. I just wanted to provide that information. We're happy to point you in the right direction. Perhaps Emily's able to provide that link in response to that question in the chat, because where there's issues of legislation that's contradictory, that's really where the ombudsperson can be helpful. This one's a little trickier because it's contradictory between the federal government and the provincial government, and there are two separate ombudspeople roles. But I would consider approaching the provincial government because that's where you're talking about the unfairness kind of manifesting in the definition of earned versus unearned income. Thanks, Sharon.
Thank you. I'm just seeing notes from folks talking about the duty to accommodate and that it's important to understand the difference between the different types of human rights, the international charter and statutory levels. People saying that racial profiling happens in the Fraser Valley. And somebody wanted to know what the terminology was to replace the class action. I think that was with regards to the HRT action.
Yeah, so it doesn't replace the language of class action in the courts, but at the Human Rights Tribunal, the language is representative complaint. And there's some process around that, and it also may be an area where there'll be some changes. I know there's some conversation around how to make that process more accessible.
So there's really specific questions that have come to us on particular human rights issues, and some may not be related to human rights issues. And so if you would like further information from us, please contact our information line. It's our email is info@bchumanrights.ca. And if you contact us, we're able to give you information and pass you on to people who might be able to help you answer your question, because we may not be the ones who have the right answer for you, but we for sure will find out who can get you the answer that you need. So I see that we've posted up the link there. All right. With that, I'm going to see if anybody has anything else that they wanted to suggest in terms of what we could be bringing to you the next time we come back. Somebody asking one last question we'll take, and that's questions around seniors and human rights. What kinds of issues that we're seeing for seniors and human rights? And I'm not sure that we could answer that for you right off the cuff, but for sure we could look into the kinds of issues that are coming up at the tribunal if we have some time to do some research on that. So please feel free to send that question in to our office, and we'll do some digging for you.
And I will say that I mean, there's many ways that question could be answered. So we won't go into all of that right now. But one of the key ways that older people's human rights are very squarely on our agenda right now are thinking about the many human rights issues that are raised by the pandemic. And as this is both a population that's medically vulnerable and also marginalized in terms, often marginalized in terms of the care and the way that seniors care is administered, regulated, and so on, and the serious risk and medical vulnerability that we've seen flow from that during COVID. These are issues that are very much on our radar, and there's some important work being done by the Seniors Advocate, as well as a report that came out recently from I believe it was SFU, perhaps in partnership with the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, definitely SFU, and on some of the issues around seniors care, which I would point you to that report if you haven't seen it already. It was released in June, and happen to know a bit more about it than I would normally, because the person who did all the research and writing of that report, after finishing that report, has now joined us as our manager of research. So some important work there, and but as I say, many issues that are affecting seniors in our communities beyond COVID as well.
Okay, with that, I'd like to give Julie a few minutes in case she wanted to say anything else or had a question herself.
Did we want to bring forward the question in regards to the issues people are seeing in the Valley?
No, I think that we're
okay.
We've seen it enough. But
right.
Just in case you had a question that you wanted to raise.
I think some of the systemic issues are being addressed, and you know, I really heard the question that was emailed into you in regards to issues around disability and that traditional medical model, institutionalized kinds of supports that have been provided, and how we really shift the culture around person-centered, person-driven supports. And I think there was another piece in that question that was around diagnosis-based supports versus needs-based. And those are huge systemic issues, right? Our funding systems, our mechanisms through MCFD, through Community Living British Columbia are all established around specific eligibility criteria. And, you know, I hear that person's concern about seeing people that are voluntarily giving their kids up to government because they just can't get the supports to be able to maintain them at home. And that's heartbreaking. And that goes back to, you know, some of the things we've seen historically around residential schools, around institutionalization of people with disabilities. So I'm encouraged to know that that the Office of the Human Rights Commissioner is, you know, interested in these systemic issues, and that we're having these conversations as communities. I know that's not really a question, but maybe just affirming that it is a broad question, right? And we look forward to, as an organization, working in this community, working with folks, with self-advocates, with families and support networks around how we shift that culture here in Chilliwack and across our province.
Thank you so much for that. We really appreciate your being with us today, and thank you for spending the last 2 hours with us and the prep time that it took for you to join us. So we're very grateful that you were able to come to be with us here today. And thank you to Elder Mike Kelly for joining us as well and opening our session in such a nice way. And thank you to my team as well. And I'm just going to pass it over to Kasari to say a couple of closing words, and then I'll wrap it up for the end of our session.
Well, I will just echo the thank yous, and thank you, Kim, as well for doing the closed captioning for us today. And to all of you for participating. It was a rich conversation that I look forward to looking through the notes as well. And please know that our virtual door is open in terms of continuing the conversation and hearing more about the concerns that you have in your own community, to make sure that we are aligned with people, what people are experiencing on the ground. And as Sharon says, we will be back over the course of the year, and again, virtually back, likely, unfortunately. And when we can, we will be there in person to visit. So I hope we can maintain our engagement with all of you.
Thank you so much for spending the time with us today. The vision of British Columbia that we have is one where we are thinking and talking and facing issues together, standing as not as a single person, representing ourselves for sure with our individual issues, but also coming together to share what we know and how we think and how we feel. This is the British Columbia that we want. I know it's the British Columbia that most of us want and we've been striving for. And together, I think that we can get there. I think it's important that we keep having these conversations and opening the doors. Thank you for inviting us into your spaces today, and take good care of yourselves in the days to come. Take care.
Bye.